Welcome to Sarder TV. I'm Vanessa Tyler. How diverse is your workplace? Who are the faces in your boardrooms, your C-suites? Kelley Cornish is an author, and she is also the Executive Vice President for U.S. Diversity and Inclusion for TD Bank. Kelley, thank you so much for joining us.
Vanessa, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
You are the Senior Vice President and Head of U.S. Diversity and Inclusion for TD Bank. Talk about your role there.
Well, my role is really exciting. No one day is the same. I've been with the organization in this role for a little over a year. It's a newly created role for TD. They were such visionaries to decide this is a space we really want to mature in, so we really need to bring someone in to kind of get us to that next level. You know, the day-to-day work in this space is really looking at creating an environment that's reflective of the communities we serve, that has a culture related to the communities we serve. And we understand that starts from the inside. So looking at the workforce, looking at not just the diversity of the workforce, but the inclusion. Once people get there, the people who are there, what type of experience are they having with the organization? That means a lot to people in the world today about truly being able to be authentic at work and create an environment where they feel safe to be who they are. So a lot of the strategy that we have is around those big streams of work, bringing in the best talent from all walks of life, really casting the net wide when we go out to look for talent, then bring them in and creating such an opportunity that they won't want to leave, that they can really be holistic in their thinking and their work and their productivity. And then also just also accountability, working with our leaders to see how we can go higher in this space and how their competencies can increase in the work. So it's really comprehensive. I could, of course, go on, but at the end of the day, it's really about creating a better work experience, work environment for everyone who comes to TD and reflecting that back into the communities.
Diversity can mean many things to whoever you're speaking with. Talk about the key goal of diversity. And are companies willing to really do the work? What you explained earlier, that's a lot. It takes a lot of mindset from the C-suite down. Are many companies willing to do this kind of work that you're explaining that TD is putting out?
You know what, I think that I always wake up saying, you know, giving everyone the benefit of the doubt that they really want to come into a workplace and create a great experience. When you look at the evolution of diversity and inclusion, not just at TD, but just globally, we've seen it over the past 15, 20 years really become this platform of work where we're bringing people in, we're trying to engage them around activities, create populations where people can get together, share ideas, share what they have in common, where they have similarities, but also where the differences may lie, and then how we can pull it together. That has really been like a big piece of the work over time. This next phase of work that I've seen D&I get into over the past 3 years is really now steeped in, okay, how are we progressing? What do the numbers really look like? How are people really feeling? And that's the hard work. That's the science within diversity and inclusion. And I think that's the question you're asking. Are companies really ready to know what that reveals and to then do the work once they know? So I do think the progressive companies and the ones that are trying to get into that next level, they're serious about it. They don't really understand the magnitude of what they're saying yes to, but they're saying, okay, yes, now where do we go from here? So I really think that the companies that want to make a difference understand. The ones who are pretty much status quo, they're still kind of on the sidelines going, this is something that's going to pass. This is the phase we're going through in the workforce. And that challenges me a little bit because those are the ones I would say 10 years from now will not be relevant, because this is the relevancy, the huge conversation piece in work right now is diversity and inclusion. And if you're not on board, then where will we be as a company in 10 years? So that's my take on how organizations are receiving it now and basically what they're doing with it, the ones that are truly progressive in this space.
It's something just came to mind, and I'm just curious, who's taking the lead on this? Are you looking for the federal government to give you the lead? Because it appears in certain instances, especially from in Washington and in the administration, I should say, it's almost a reversal on a lot of things. So where we talked about years ago, are you feeling the lead or getting any kind of push from that direction that this is the way we should continue going?
Well, when I think about the compliancy in this space, it's still pretty much the same as it was. You have the Department of Labor, you have areas that look at EEO, and they're very mindful about it and saying, we expect you, if you have 15 employees or more, what they call the OFCCP, which is a long acronym, but people need to know about it if they're in this space, the OFCCP. They are constantly monitoring the behavior of companies. And the bigger you go, if you want to do business with the federal government, these are some things you need to be mindful of. These are the parameters and the regulations that we're going to put on it, and we will make sure that you're looking at how you hire minorities, how you hire women, how you hire veterans and individuals with diverse abilities or people with diverse abilities. So there are components and subpopulations that they're mindful to monitor. That hasn't changed. That has been in place for a while. They're still on top of their game with that. It is a lot that does go on in Washington, but those are some pieces that are consistent. And I know when I develop my framework, I work with what I know is consistent and what I know we have obligation to. And that's a big piece of the work. We are a federal contractor. We do work with the federal government. So this is our responsibility in that space. So that piece hasn't changed. The larger conversation with diversity and inclusion, I think, yes, it has changed. It has shifted. And so you're going to have to be mindful of what position you're going to take and how that looks and the optics of that for your company. So those are the conversations that you're hearing in boardrooms and with larger executives to say, who are we in this space when it comes to doing the right thing, not just around compliancy, but about doing the right thing to our stakeholders, for our employees, and others that are important to our work.
Starbucks recently did something unprecedented. They offered mandatory corporate racial sensitivity training. What can other corporations learn from Starbucks?
One thing I can say about Starbucks, and everyone has their own opinion about Starbucks, is they took action. You may not totally agree with the action that they took, but I think it was swift. The way their CEO came out was amazing. Okay, we own this, and now this is a plan we're going to put in place with other stakeholders to begin to make a difference. Will it make a difference overnight? Absolutely not, because they didn't get there overnight like the rest of the people in the world when it comes to various biases or things that happen. But they did say, okay, this is the beginning. I think what people fail to see is it's a process. It's a process. So whatever your hiccup is and however you address it, you just need to address it in a progressive way, and in their case, in a very public way, to make people say, okay, they are doing something about it. They are trying to correct or do some course correction. So other companies, yes, you can offer training, you can have focus groups, you can have town halls, you can just bring it to light. The worst thing you can do is say nothing and do nothing. So again, people may challenge the what and how it was done, but at the end of the day, they did step up, and put something in place to begin. And they've always said this isn't the end. We know we have work to do. And I think the transparency and just how that played out publicly was a good move for them.
How do you advise a company to create a more diverse workforce?
Wow, so many different ways. Of course, the first opportunity you have is in your open positions. It's in recruitment, it's in talent acquisition, it's looking at what's available. And I always say, if I'm a hiring manager, and I have been for the past 6 months building a team, 6 to 9 months building out a new team, is who's not at the table? What voice am I missing? When I think about our stakeholders, when I think about the world and the globe, who's not engaged in the decision making of my team? And then that's where I start. And so when I go and I talk with the recruiter, I said, let me tell you what I need. Let me tell you what will add value to my team. So I think understanding what's missing and who's not a part of the conversation will automatically open you up to think, I need a diverse and inclusive team. And you decide then who's missing. And that's where you can go. That's one way. Another way is to look at surveys. You may do some internal surveys, look at your employee engagement. What are they saying? What are they saying about what's missing or what could be better or where we have opportunity? You take that and you put that into your decision making with a team, with as you look at your hiring practices. And then what are your customers saying? A lot of people look at customer surveys. What are your stakeholders saying? You know, so it's not really all about what you personally, as a man or hiring manager wants. It's about what does the company need? What does the team need? What does the larger business unit need? What does the company need? And when you put those lens and filters on the question, I guarantee you your hiring process will be very different than it traditionally was. It will not be homogenous. It will be very focused on what's missing. And then you look for the best of the best when you go after that particular talent pool. So those are some ideas.
Imagining opening the door of a boardroom and you see everyone sitting around the table and everyone is a white male. In this day and age, you say what to yourself?
I say so much opportunity. I say so much opportunity. Do they realize what part of the segment of the world they're missing? Do they realize the discretion that comes with the income that's available that they're missing? Do they, and it's you look at different subpopulations and go, we're not even tapping that. We don't have representation to help bring that voice to major decisions we're making for a company. How can it's very simple. I go back to myself. I would tell my kids, I'm trying to always figure out how to be your mother. I can't tell you how to be a man. You know, that should come from your father. You know, it's very similar. It's looking at that like, you know, they can probably talk about what they know, but what is it that they don't know? And you know, the big piece, this is learning, the big piece is we don't know what we don't know. So if you are limiting the thinking in a room based off of one group, man, shame on you. It's just a missed opportunity. So if I walk into a room and I see that, I'm like right away, because I spot it right away. It could be all women, it could be, you know, the same race, it could be anything, it could be the same age, it could be younger people. I'm like, where's your wisdom? So it happens all over. And I think everybody should ask that question, who's not at the table? That will help us make a better decision and that can move us ahead.
Women are demanding equal pay. We've always heard the statistics. Now we are seeing a demand for action. How fast will corporate America catch up?
You know, this is one of those things that the external environment is going to control this. And I think the more pressure, the more we see groups out there coming together to say this is no longer an option. This is mandatory, and either we get this done or we can go somewhere else. And so I really think that everything from the Me Too movement to just the younger generation stepping up and voicing their opinions, that it's demanding corporate America to say, where are we in this space? I saw a wonderful piece on 60 Minutes with Salesforce lately on how their CEO was just like, we've got to crack this. You know, we've got to, and not just make it right, but consistently look at it to see how we can improve in this space. And really, I think that all leaders have to peel back the onion and really look at all the subpopulations and say, where are we missing the mark? Where is there inequity? You know, because we have diversity and inclusion, but then there's also equity. This is the piece around equity, you know. So if we truly are who we say we are, that we value and respect all people, then this is part of that. This is part of that conversation. So I do think that this is the beginning of something that's going to take off pretty rapidly, just because it's such a movement behind it. And we've seen in this country, in the US, that things happen behind a movement. You know, in the 60s, it was a movement. Here we are. We're standing on the shoulders of that. This is a new wave, and it takes a little disruption to get movements going. But I do think that this is a piece of that new movement and that we are going to see change pretty quickly.
Should every business, large or small, have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion?
You know, so when you get into the naming of a department or an office, I would say that depending on the size of the organization, it may not have the name Office of Diversity and Inclusion, but for them to have something similar to like a Center of Excellence or a business unit that's dedicated to the work, absolutely. Gone are the days where you just do this off the side of your desk. Well, we will add these 3 things around diversity onto your job description, HR generalist, and say, you own this, and we will see things happen. Organizations that have opted to do that, it will take much longer to see progress. And again, I really think that the external world is demanding progress sooner rather than later. So I would say that definitely an infrastructure needs to be set up that's dedicated solely to pushing out diversity and inclusion, integrating it, and showing where accountability lies. Accountability should not lie with that Center of Excellence, but they should be the ones to generate the conversation, the strategy, the infrastructure, to push out to the executives to say, this is what you own, hiring manager, this is what you own, employee, this is what you own, and how do we come together and continuously monitor that? So I do think that an organization needs some type of hub that's on top of that 24/7, and I'll take it a step further to say, in that space needs to be people that are steeped in the work, that are experts. It's enough people now. When I started this over 25 years ago, it was a handful of people doing this work. Now you have kids in college that are studying this. They're writing papers on it. They're doing case competition on it. So the information is so available, and it's people out there that are certified to do this work. So you have to get an expert in there, because this is not just meeting for dinner. This is not just celebrating a month. This is about moving and progressing. And in order to do that, you need someone that knows the science of diversity and inclusion if you're truly serious about making some progress in this space.
I know you mentioned that it's certainly about equity and being fair and doing what's right and showing who we are, but there's also a bottom line component to this. Absolutely. How does this make, and a lot of CEOs will now perk up, how would this make a company money?
You know, I think it's in any other talent. I mean, anytime talent walks out of the door, the company it's a cost to that. It's a cost to that. It is a cost to, when you think of the ROI of diversity and inclusion, you can look at it in so many different ways. What are those subpopulations? Who are they in the organization? Not only are we recruiting them, but are we retaining them? And if we're not retaining them, I call it a leaky bucket. You can bring people in, but if people aren't staying, there are formulas out there to show you how much you're spending as an organization to go out and recruit again. That's an area that you look at. You look at claims in the space. I mean, people file EEOC claims. That's costing the company its reputation. That's costing manpower. That's costing investigation time. And then the ultimate that no one ever wants to see is a lawsuit. No one really wants to see that happen. So how do we stay ahead of this conversation around diversity and inclusion and have so many constructs in place that people in the world know we value it, we live it, we breathe it, and we are mindful of the people that are in our organizations. And we want them to be we definitely want it to be a melting pot. That reflects, again, what we say we believe. And again, you don't want to be on the reactive side of that. You want to be on the proactive side of that. A lot of people, and they'll tell you, major companies, they've come into this space from the reactive side. We were sued, we lost, we started Office of Diversity and Inclusion. That came out of, the verdict. And no one wants to be on that side of that. No one wants to, people say, we'd love to be on the news, but we don't be on the news for that, And I think that in this day and age, because it takes one social media, it takes one tweet, it takes one video that wasn't supposed to be sent out to really have your stock prices drop. So you have to understand there is a value to doing this and doing it right and doing it with meaning and understanding if something does happen, how to course correct. But it is an ROI to it. And you truly have to understand the value of doing it right, and the value of not doing it. Because the value of not doing it could really affect your bottom line. And there's so much research out there from McKinsey. Deloitte does a lot in this space to show that, we see companies that have ethnically diverse teams, that their profit soars compared to companies that do not have ethnically diverse teams. They've really put the process in place. They've done the research where you could see some, profit exceed 25, 30% over companies that did not have the innovation. So it's worth really digging in, and for CEOs saying, what am I missing? We may be doing great, but we could be doing amazing. What are we missing? And how are we different from those companies that are at that next, level in the work? So those are some things that I would say consider.
Talk about the reason for writing the book. It's mentioned by Gavin Kerr in the foreword of your book, It's Work, How Will You Show Up? That it doesn't matter where you went to school, Harvard, a Rhodes Scholar, or even community college. There are certain things you don't get in school. What are those things, and is that the reason why you wrote the book?
It is. So the reason I wrote the book, it was so interesting. I guess in 2012, I returned to work out of being out of work for a couple of years, no choice of my own. It was one of those pitfalls in my career where the company and myself, we decided to part ways. And so I spent 2 years really, and then I felt like I was at the top of my game. I was like, how could this happen? This doesn't happen. Does it happen to me? But during that time, I was on the other side, and I can tell you, after 200 interviews, and that's cumulative. So when you go into interview with a company, you don't just interview with one person. You usually interview with 5, 6, sometimes 10 people. So I put all of that into that. Numerous companies, from Fortune 100 companies to very small companies, just really trying to think about, how do I reinvent myself? What am I going to do? Where am I? I was 40 at the time. It's just like, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm at the tipping point. What's going to happen? And so I learned so much. So when I actually got back into the workplace and a high corporate role, I started going out and speaking on what I thought was diversity and inclusion. But people were really trying to understand how to we had come out of the recession, but people were still retooling and just trying to figure out this world. When they realized I was in HR, my work was in HR, more of the questions was about, so tell me about, why can't I get my resume in front of someone? I was on panels and thinking, again, I'm talking about diversity and inclusion, but they really wanted to know more about work and how do I do this? How did you do it? How did you get back? How did you jump here? And so I got so frustrated because I was like, this is not what I'm supposed to be speaking about. So I was coming back from an event in DC, and I was on the train, and I said, okay, I'm just going to put all of this and some quick tips, whether you're looking for a job, you've landed, or by the way, next, you need to do something different. And I had like 25 tips. I did it, and I closed my computer, and God, the divine, was like, that's your book. I was like, no, I'm not on a beach. I'm not. The waves aren't crashing, and I'm doing something I really want to do, But really, I started thinking about it. And again, the questions kept coming and coming every time I would go out, and I had them ready then. And it just really made for a quick guide. And it was really lessons I had learned and lessons I knew being in HR were needed. And so I took those and really just began to write out the manuscript.
When you say how you show up, I'm assuming you're not speaking about a Navy business suit with a briefcase or anything, but do you mean how are you showing up mentally? And you mentioned God, spiritually?
I think it's how you show up holistically. And I remember being on a team of coaches. I did do some interim work when I was out of work full time, and I was doing some executive coaching at a college, at a medical school. And I was on a team with this guy, and it was great. Every time we would walk in the room and we're sitting down with one of our clients, he'd be so quiet at the end. He was like, so how do you want to show up here? You know, what do you want your image to be here? You know, what do you want people to say? And that always stuck with me. And so really, it's not just about what you know, the work they've asked you to do, but what do you want people to feel when you walk into a room and when you're part of a larger organization. So how do you want to be recognized? And so that's really the package of the person and how you want to show up. And a lot of that, your emotional well-being comes into play on how you come to work every day. What you believe and what you don't believe, for me, around spirituality, that comes into work. The how I show up at work every day, that really helps me in my decision making and my integrity and what I stand for. And then of course your overall executive presence. What do you want to deliver? How do you want to show up on a stage, in a meeting room, in a one-on-one meeting, in a Q&A? How do you want to show up? So the tips in that book try to really help you become well-rounded in that space. So at the end, you can go to your goals at the end of your section and go, this is what I'm striving for. This is what I want to do.
Your book is laid out beautifully. It begins with the hunt, looking for a job. You mentor a very smart young athlete who is going to be a surgeon. It's unbelievable. But along the way, he is in line for an administrative fellowship. Talk about your co-author, Myron Roll.
Myron is amazing. This is one of those divine connections that I was doing my job, running a diversity and inclusion department at a company, and get a call from the CEO. And it's like, when you see the CEO's name come up on your caller ID, I went straight to my boss. It's like, what happened? You know, what's going on? Why is he calling me? She's like, I don't know, but you let me know how that goes. So it was great. So I went upstairs to his office. This young man is sitting there. He's like, I'm mentoring Myron. And he said he's chosen to go to medical school and wants to spend some time in healthcare. And I'm going to assign him to you. And so I'm sitting here like, that's not I didn't sign up for this. Oh my gosh, who's this kid, you know? But so we started spending time together, and I remember talking to and this plays into, I remember talking to my oldest son who was in college at Arizona State at the time. I was like, yeah, this guy, and I mentioned the name, he goes, do you know who that is? That's like Myron Roll. He said, All-American, and so I Googled him, I'm like, wow and wow. So this is a young man who went to school, finished in 3 years, went to Florida State, was an amazing All-American athlete, had the choice of sticking through and going to the NFL as a possible first-round draft pick, or going to become a Rhodes Scholar. He had won the Rhodes Scholarship and had the opportunity to go, and he chose to do that. And then left that program, and then went to the NFL. Stayed there for 5 years and said, you know what, I want to be a neurosurgeon. Left the NFL, and then that's when my leader at the time connected with them to help prepare him for his MCATs. And so I spent that year with him. Myron is just this amazing, you read about him. Where is he now? Of course he's at Harvard, you know, doing his residency as a neurosurgeon. He went on, he followed his dreams. He is someone to look up, to follow, to go, wow. You know, if you can have 4 different jobs before the age of 30, he would be one. And the last one is the ultimate. He's doing some great stuff.
Your advice as you prepare for your decks, specifically, how should we network with a purpose?
So, you know, so many opportunities. We have extra time. We think we don't, but you have to be mindful of what you say yes to. And I know that when you're growing in your career, so many things will come at you. And you have so many opportunities either to go have dinner with friends or to go to this event or that event. And it's okay to do all those, but what is the purpose? When you get there, if you know, I'm trying to advance in my career, when I go, am I going with a purpose? Am I going to meet 2 to 3 people that I definitely want to reconnect with? Am I going to meet 2 to 3 people that are focused in this area in particular? Then I need to probably do some research ahead of time to see who's going to be there. If I get there, I need to ask the right questions. You can be talking to someone, if you find out it's just they're not in a space where you're trying to get to, possibly move on and start talking to someone else. And I always say, we sign up for things. Everything I did, especially when I was growing and trying to figure out what was next for me, anything I volunteered for was pushing me into that purpose. So for example, kids, we all sign up to do, when you have kids, you sign up to do things at their school. I was not on a bake sale. I mean, it was time to write grants. It was time to work with administration, to prepare things for a school board. Those are the type of activities that I was in because it gave me some strategic skills that I needed, that I could transfer back into the workplace. And so I think that when you network and when you volunteer and you sign up to say you're going to do something, think about, does it tie in? Is it a win-win? Is it a win-win for me, for where I'm trying to go, and for the other organization? So, and volunteering for the HR association that I was a president of in Philadelphia, which was a really large organization, I was very strategic in my membership. I started off as a VP of programming. I wanted to understand all things about HR. I went on to be president-elect and then president, where I managed a board with companies of, Fortune 100 to 500 companies were on our board. We learned finances, we learned legal. I learned all of this stuff from people that were on that board, and that has transferred over to me in the workplace. And that was a safe space for me to play in, because at work it's always not so safe. You need to be on top of your game and know what you're doing, but you can't always get the experience at work. So you need to figure out when you're outside of work, is it purposeful? Am I networking? Am I spending my time the right way?
You also advise that to practice for 3 kinds of interviews. I love this. The one-on-one, which many of us are familiar with, the panel, which you talked about how you interview with many people, and the Skype. How are those interview techniques, I guess, different? How are they different?
Yeah, they're really different. I know when people reach out to me and say, man, I have an interview coming up, I want to talk to you before I go have my interview. And right away I ask them, who are you interviewing with? Do you know the names? Do you know the titles? Do you know how you're going to interview? And sometimes I have to go back and ask the recruiter, you need to know what you're walking into, because you can show up and they say, oh, we want you to meet with so-and-so, and then you walk into a room and there's 6 people in there. Oh, to be mindful of everyone's time, we want to make sure, or this person was in town, so we want to bring them in as part of, and you're like, wow. So I would say always be prepared for interviewing with more than one person collectively. But for the one-on-one, that's really easy. That's when you can prepare, you can talk to the person, find out about that person, do some research on that person and their particular role. It's so much out there now that you probably can find out more about people than they probably choose to have you know. But just try to, so you can engage in some small talk about possibly what's going on in their life, something they've recently written, or something like that. And then, of course, know all your facts about the company, know all your facts about that particular division of the company and the work. When it's a panel, again, try to find out ahead of time if it is a panel and the people who will be a part of that panel, the roles, and the role that they play as relates to the role that you're trying to pursue. Because the interaction will be a bit different and they'll come at you with questions more around their agenda than your agenda. So understanding collectively, and to understand when you are addressing a group of 6, whoever asked a question, that's who you have eye contact with. When questions are being asked, look at the person, but also kind of scan the room, because body language is huge, and trying to understand that piece. So those are some things I definitely would consider, and try, if everyone is there, if you haven't heard from someone, near the end say, I haven't heard from you, do you have a question? Definitely go back to someone possibly who didn't speak up. And then when it's your turn to give questions or to ask questions, make sure you have a collective question for everyone, and then maybe have 1 or 2 directed specifically if your hiring manager, the person you're going to work for is in the room, but someone else that may have talked about something that really you can really speak to. So it's really, really taking command of the room when you have that. Skype, wow. So Skype or FaceTime or however they set it up, video conferencing, telepresence, whatever you want to call it. I've been in a couple of those situations. One where I had 2 people in DC, I was in Philly, on telepresence and then 3 people in the room. So you're playing like you going back and forth. And again, so you use the dynamics of what I shared around the panel, but then you also have to remember to engage with that group that's out in the internet world, in the space, So really it's your body language and really trying to, because I've seen people really get upset and nervous when they're having to ping and bounce off of people. So you need to practice it. And you can practice that at home, especially if you know any teenager that knows how to FaceTime and had 4 or 5 people on with them. That's an example. They will do well in situations like that. But actually there are places you can go where you can practice this, that have telepresence and ask them to, if you want to rent the time, if it's a really important role and you're something serious about it. And the last thing I'll say about you calling in or being part of a Skype or FaceTime, make sure that your environment in the back is just, it looks nice, and that the voice levels, you're in a place where voice levels, dogs aren't barking, kids aren't under the table, mommy, daddy, or in my case, at my house, there's always the lawn people that just decide they want to come during that time. So you just have to realize, what's going on and presenting an environment. And that's very different than walking into an office and having a conversation with someone. You have to think of other things that are going on around you that will either distract you or you can't be your best you in that interview. So those are some things.
Another great piece of advice that you give is you begin preparing before the need. I guess you begin looking around maybe for your next job before the need?
You know what, and it could be your next job or it could be that next skill set. I always say, develop before you have to. So, and I'll take myself as an example. Especially every January, but now so it's like a couple of times a year, I sit back and go, what skill set don't I have that I know is going to be required to do this work that I'm doing around diversity and inclusion at another level, with larger stakeholders on a global platform. What is it? And then what education do I need? What learning do I need? For a long time, and I'll start early in my career, when I first had a large team, and I start getting all of these budgets. Every team had a different budget, and I had to start managing all these cost centers. I actually went to a millennial that we had recruited from the banking industry. I was in healthcare, and I said, teach me this whole finance budget. And not just, I knew that, but I didn't understand it from the healthcare perspective. And the company I was working for, they had their own process around it. So I know I needed to sharpen myself in that space. And I know we're going to talk in a minute about coaching and mentoring, but he truly coached me to say, this is what you need. And it was like 2 or 3 sessions, but this is what you need as your cost center continues to grow. These are the skills you need to know. This is what you need to look for. This is when you're in the red. This is when you're in the black. This is when you're going into the red. And so just really understanding that. Then I got to another level, probably 5 or 6 years later, when social media just took off, and just trying to stay on top of every social media platform, then pulling back and saying, well, which ones do I really need? So that was a piece. And now I'm in the space where D&I over the past 3 years, diversity and inclusion, has gone to such a level that it's like unprecedented. You need to stay on top of what's happening every time the Supreme Court meets, to what's happening in the industry you're working in around regulation, what's happening just in global communities. What are the movements that are happening? Because all of that plays right back into the workplace. So me staying on top of that and being engaged in huge cohorts that are having those conversations, that's important to me right now, where we share best practices of what's working. So yeah, developing before the need.
What is the purpose of writing and putting a date on your game plan?
Yeah, so my book, I mentioned the game plan. So at the end of each chapter, there is a segment to pause. And the way I wrote the book is, you could be at a different phase. You could be looking for a job, in a job you've landed. So if you read that section, depending on where you are, so you're in the hunt, you're looking for a job. After you read it and you've sort of really internalized the practices or just the different items I've shared, then you go back and say, okay, so now what do I do? So what is my goal? What do I need? What time frame? What are 2 or 3 things I need to do to make that happen? So if it's my job to research a company and meet someone in that company, that's a target company for me. That's the goal. What are 2 or 3 things I'm going to do? I'm going to get on LinkedIn, number one, find out. I'm going to ask my network. I'm going to do whatever else you feel like you need to do to learn about this company. Then when am I going to do it? That's important because, as I say, if you don't set a goal for yourself or you don't set goals, then if you don't work in your plan, you're working somebody else's plan. So you need to be working your plan. That's your plan. And then you sign it because you're accountable to you, and then you date it. And so you can go back 2 weeks from now and go, 2 weeks ago I said I'm going to do this. I was going to do this. Did I get it done? If not, why? And so I think that's what's important, to sign it and date it. It's like, I said this and I own this. I own my career. So I've got to get this done.
In chapter 2 of your book, you talk about landing that job. I love where you write, day 30 should look like day 1. In your dress, in your demeanor, in your workspace. Please explain what happens to employees where those things seem really obvious, but it stops happening in their work lives.
Yeah, so I'm a stickler for excellence. I just think that, we were placed on this earth to bring nothing but excellence. And I really push that. And so the way you show up in all areas of work is really important. So day 1, what is day 1? Everyone's smiling, they look great, they've got their best suit on, they're trying to meet as many people as they can, they're trying to take it all in. And even day 2 up day 3, then they get comfortable, they get their workspace, they get their work assignment, and sometimes then within 30 days, their head is down. It's just like, okay, I'm here, I've landed, I've got to do the work. No, you need to bring that same energy, that same vitality that you bring on day 1. And we all have bad days, but you have to get up again and go, okay, why did I want this job? Why do I want to be here? And what does excellence look like? It looks like day 1 because everyone is so excited. And you need to bring that same energy. And really, again, we all have bad days, but the key is to always look up and go, how was I on day 1? And am I still that same person?
How many employees should read their own job descriptions and why?
So just a secret for people who are not in HR. So when you go and we advertise for jobs, there's a framework that we put out there. You really can't put all particulars of a job description out there. People probably wouldn't read them, and it's really not necessary for you to get the scope of the work. So I recommend that when you start a new job, whoever recruited you said, can I have the job description? Like the real job description. Ask them for the real job description, not the one that was posted. And then really read it, and you'll understand that job descriptions are written for a few reasons. Number one, to inform you and to get the talent, but we also price jobs in the market with a job description. We do a lot of things. The job description is used a lot for compliancy as well as, for the person to know what their job is and everyone else's. But it's so many things in that. And I so remember leaving a couple of jobs and they had to look at my job description, and the leader would be like, you don't do any of this. Your job is 3 times what this is. But I think if you consistently look at your job description, when the rest of the world is in chaos, when the organization is in chaos, you go back and say, this is what I signed up to do. This is consistent. I know I may be doing some other things, but this is what I've signed up to do. And then what have I added to that? Then you may be able to go back to a performance time and go, I'm doing a lot more than what I signed up for. Let's talk about it. Maybe let's renegotiate it. So it is important every once in a while, number one, to just keep you focused. And then number two, to see, is that job still relevant? So reading your job description is really important.
How should employees take their job descriptions, then add into that job their own experiences? Meaning, like you were saying, you have your job descriptions, but now you're adding your own flavor. You're adding you're bringing more to that job description. Should employees do that, and how should they do it?
You're always going to have that last few words at the end of the job description that says, and other duties. that usually, as required. So usually that's a huge bucket. Once you've been in the role for a while, you realize this is a lot of and other, but really that's your flavor that's coming in. Those are those things that really, I hired you, but I really didn't know that you could do it. But now I see your strengths. You're my go-to person for that now, And then again, understanding your value. This goes back to owning your career. So you start looking at the job description and realize it's a lot of these and other requirements that I'm doing. Wow, I have more knowledge, skills, and abilities, KSAs, that were originally noted when I was hired. So what can I do with that? And again, you could turn that into an additional stretch opportunity, a great conversation with your leader to say, because really if you don't bring that to your leader's running, and it's not that they don't want to make things right with you, they're just running in 50 different directions. They're like, I hired the person, they're in this role called this, and we're good. And I can also go to them for this, this, and this. So I just think it's important that you, as you look at, especially if you're trying to go to that next level, understanding what other skill sets you now have that you've developed even more in this particular role where you've added your flavor, and just document them, and especially during review time, and share it. And you may go after another role internally or externally, and you'll have some of those things that you can anchor in to say, I did this work for this amount of time. And it's definitely a conversation piece for you to have with your leader.
You talk about moving on to your next in the book. There, your co-author tells his amazing story. What a choice, as we said, going to England as a Rhodes Scholar before heading to medical school, or should he go right into the millions of dollars awaiting him in the NFL? There you outline the ability to make a career change. Talk about the plan you devised for him, which you kind of talked about earlier, and talk about career transitions. You definitely talked about some of the advice that you gave to Myron.
For Myron, it was really us at the time, and it was a team of us that I pretty much led, was making this, at the time, I think he was coming out of his stint with the Pittsburgh Steelers, into a healthcare executive. It's like, and looked amazing in a suit, but now it's placing him in a office, helping him understand Outlook, helping him understand how to schedule, helping him to understand who the stakeholders were, then taking that brilliant mind from being part of the Rhodes Scholars program and really integrating it into the work and giving him work assignments and giving him rotations and understanding. It was just amazing to see, even sitting on the sidelines, of how he could take something and just multiply it with just the skill set that he had and the knowledge and the depth training around thinking that he had. So helping him to now take what he had learned in theory, turn it to day-to-day practice. He came in a great time in healthcare when we were on the cusp of the Affordable Care Act, and we were in a company that was really moving forward in that space. So he would be on different teams. He would be deployed out to different teams to really be part of a think tank and then produce a product. So teaching him how to do that, how to circle back with stakeholders, how to have one-on-one meetings, how to document his time, how to be part of a schedule from 8:30 to 5, and then, by the way, sometimes we may need you afterwards. And then just really understanding the work of work. And I say that, I'll reference my oldest son. He graduated from college in 2014 and went straight to work here in New York City for a really large company. And I remember him calling me a week later and goes, I learned none of this in school. I don't know these meetings and, my time and why every time I try to schedule something with an executive, their calendar's blocked. I said, because they have an assistant. They don't want you to schedule anything on their calendars, So just really trying to understand how your expense reports and, how to manage a corporate card, a corporate credit card, and this. So really taking him through that body of work for a year was amazing to him. It was a different thought process than, suiting up for practice every day. And then Sundays, that was their game day. So this was a different mindset for him, and it was great. And it was such a great experience, not just for me and him, but the people who were around him who could see his skill set shift and him learn just about work and also deeper knowledge of healthcare as he prepared for his MCAT. So it was awesome.
When you should prepare for your next job, how should it affect your current job while you're preparing for your next one? And I love how you say you find at least one person at your current job who speaks well of you.
You know, and I mentioned some of this earlier, it's just really thinking about your role and where you want to go next. And some people, you have to understand, some people want to elevate and go to that next level of leadership, managing a bigger piece. Some people want to elevate within their current structure. So maybe a recruiter wants to be a senior recruiter. You know, so it all depends on where you want to go. So preparing to do that and how you do that really depends on you, because it depends on what you want. When I think about the work that Myron was doing and really just trying to understand that piece of work, hopefully one day he will run a mega healthcare institution. I'm sure his thoughts right now are definitely being a neurosurgeon. He will be one of the best in the world, I'm sure. But we were looking to see and preparing him around what if he were to run, you know, a mega healthcare organization, what skill sets, what competencies would he need? And so, you know, just really trying to understand the bigger picture. And then the part about having someone, at least one person, that one person, 9 times out of 10, is not your boss. Because if you're looking to move on, depending on the relationship with your boss may know, your boss may not know. If it's something internal, your boss definitely needs to know, because we're going to have to go through that boss anyway. But if something external, maybe not. So you need someone that's at, and I think I added in there, that's at a higher level than you, that you worked on a team with, that's seen your work, that knows your credibility, that knows your integrity, and we don't see this that often when a call to check references, but someone you can point to and say, yeah, you know what, I worked with Susan. She could really speak to the work that I did around this framework. And again, higher up in the organization may not have been your direct leader, but someone else. You know, what's ideal is your direct leader knows, they'll speak of your work, but you need someone that can really point to you and go, you know what, I would hire that person if I had the opportunity to.
Millennials are often criticized for not staying at a job very long. But is there a downside with staying at a job too long?
Yes. I think so, and maybe not staying at a job, but in a role. So you can stay at a company forever. However, I really recommend after about 4 or 5 years, if that long, you begin to think of what else can I do? How else can I grow in the organization if I choose? And there are some organizations you really love the culture and you want to stay. The key is just not to get stuck. You know, but I do have friends now that have been with companies for 17, 18 years. They're like, you know, I really want to do something different. And they're finding a challenge and getting out and seeing how other people think and how that world rolls, you know? So I would say just always. And I had a mentor, Gavin, who opened the book for me, did the forward. He said, you know, at least once a year, you need to be testing the market. You need to test the market. He said that does 2 things. It keeps you sharp and it keeps us sharp as an organization. Because when you go out there and you know what other people are demanding of the type of role that you're in, then you'll bring that back and you'll raise the bar and, you know, you will be even more excellent in what you're doing, and we'll see that. I think it's definitely value and constantly looking at what's going on in the environment, in the space that you're in, and how things are evolving. And then if the opportunity presents itself, I mean, people want to grow, they want to do well, they want to do better 9 times out of 10, and the opportunity may present itself for you to move on, either internally or externally, and be open to that. Be open to that. Don't stay stuck. So yeah, they harp on the millennials, but they actually started with Generation X. They kept saying that we bounced around too. But, you know, I think it's what's making corporate America right now and keeping us very successful. So, yeah.
Should your current employer know that you're looking?
Again, it depends on the relationship you have with them. I have members on my team where if it's a role that comes open, Internally especially, and I think they have the skill set for, I'll send it to them. I'm like, I really think that you need to look at this. And of course, sometimes they'll come back and like, I'm not interested. And I get roles from outside of the organization. I'll share with them as well. It's like, share with your network, look into it. If you have an interest, let me know. Just so, but I'm that type leader that's really open because I want them all to like go out and conquer the world with diversity and inclusion, But every leader isn't like that. They want to kind of hold on. They finally have a great team. They want to hold on. And it's a part of that is okay, but a part is not okay. So again, it depends on the relationship you have with your leader. Everyone can't have that conversation.
And opposite of holding on, what about if the change is not self-directed?
Yeah. So sometimes, every day we're a line item. We're part of a bigger conversation that's happening somewhere. And I have been on the receiving end of that to say, we're going to do something different. And so you have to be prepared. And a lot of times it's agreeing to disagree, but just understanding, not to leave anything on the table, to understand what your value is in that decision. So it happens both ways every day.
What exactly is a game plan?
A game plan is your own strategy for your career. What are you doing? Where are you going? My husband and I, we have these conversations all the time, and we're definitely seasoned in our careers, but we still ask the question, what's next? What's next? And then how are we going to get there? And what does it mean? And sometimes it's things outside of your careers. We have 2 or 3 other things that we love to pursue. Where are we going with that? What's the next level around that? So it's having your own, we all work within someone else's strategy, someone else's mission and objectives. Those are your own, that's your game plan. What is your game plan? I work with my youngest son right now as he goes into his senior year on applying to colleges. And so I said, okay, so we're going to put a plan up in your room. So he has this plan up there, the schools I'm interested in, the schools I've applied to, the response, the date I replied, the date I completed the application, and then comments on, well, what's next? So that's his plan right now. You work your plan, and I'm going to ask you about your plan. So, but we have to put things in front of us to stay focused. My team, we have a plan. We work on a strategy. We're consistently revisiting that strategy to say, are we on point? What needs to go away? What's working? What's not working? You always have to have that conversation because it can make or break you as you plan for your future.
What I also really, really admire and love are the quotes, your Bible quotes in the book. You said that, of course we have all known you fall 7 times, but you get up again. And that's really an advice for life. Right. You fall, you get up. You believe falling down happens. Staying down is the problem, of course. Talk about the pitfalls, career stagnation, being fired, but then rising from the ashes of a broken career.
Yeah, that, unless you experience it, you really don't understand the magnitude of it when something has been pulled from under you. And you may experience it in different ways. It could have been, an illness someone in your family didn't overcome. It could be a divorce. It could be something where you've fallen and you're really struggling to see light of day. It takes time. I'd say you have to trust the process and allow the process to happen. But in that, do one thing, do something every day where you can begin to see the light of day. If it's not working, it's who did I call today? Who did I connect with on LinkedIn today? Who did I have a conversation with? Who did I have coffee with? And slowly build yourself back up. Because, everyone has a resume, everyone has a bio, but you only know your worth. And sometimes that doesn't come across on paper. So you have to understand what your worth is and really pull that out every day. So in order to kind of get back to where you were. And it's a process. And in that, when you're searching for a job, you're going to be rejected. You're going to see something that possibly feels right, but it could be something better. So do I make those decisions? You get a great network around you that you can bounce things off, a good advisory group, good friends that you can be honest with. So it's a lot of things I share in that to help you get back up to get to that place.
You end the book with bonus tips. What are the bonus tips to help us survive the workplace? They are deep in scripture. How welcome are these spiritual words in today's workplace, and how desperately are these words needed, especially now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I got together with the publisher to write the book, I was like, Sean, I want to write a book designed for the secular world that's steeped in Christian principles. But I don't want someone to turn away from it and feel like I'm just like hammering them over the head about, thou art and whatever. And but I know my belief system, and people ask me how have I been successful? And that's the beginning. That's where I start. I am a Christian. I am a believer, and I ground all things and filter all decisions in the Bible. And so it's not a day that doesn't go by that I'm in it. And the Proverbs, a lot of what you see at the end are around the Proverbs, which is nothing but wisdom, and people in various ways of life, they have their own way of saying what those say. So I do think people they may believe in a different way. I can't say that people have bought the book in companies. TD bought the book initially before I even started with them. They bought 250 copies, which was amazing. And they shared with one of their diversity groups, Minorities in Leadership. And that was really my entree into the organization. And so and right away, I'm sure they read it. I start off based in Christian principles, and I end it based in Christian principles. And I really haven't thought about if it hadn't been received, because I feel like the people who need it will get it, and the people who don't want it, that's their option. But that's what diversity is all about. That's what diversity is all about, and living that part of your life openly.
What's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And in business, do we need both?
Yeah, so again, Kelley's definition and how I've utilized both over the years. A mentor to me, at the end of the day, I have 2 or 3 people that know me like other people don't. They know my work life, they know my home life, they know Kelley, and they've lived with me through some ups and some downs. So when I look to them, it's more around wisdom and how to make sound decisions about something. 9 times out of 10, it is a career. And one in particular, I keep going back to Gavin. I remember bringing jobs to him saying, wow, I would have to relocate to Chicago or to this part of New York or something. And right away, he would say, I'm not sure if that's right for the boys at this age, or I know that community. I'm not sure if you'll adapt well there. This would be great. Why don't we try this? And so, but it took me being very vulnerable and him understanding the ups and downs of my life for him to help me make a sound decision about what to do next. And my other 2 mentors are just the same. And I have, and from a diversity perspective, I think this is important. He's a Caucasian male. I have another Caucasian male, and I have an African American woman who are my mentors that know my life like a lot of people don't, so they can help me. A coach is someone like I described earlier, the millennial who helped me with my finances at a time. I brought him in for a moment of time. I saw something I needed to develop, and he helped me with it. I see coaches as those people that come and help you see the blind spots, help you see what you can't see, and help you sharpen those. So to me, that's the difference in the 2, and you need both depending on where you are. A mentor to me is someone you can have for life. And there are mentorship programs. Because there are tons of them. We have tons of them at TD. And those are, small engagements with people. But when I mentor someone, it's a life experience, and I help them understand that. I'm mentoring a young lady now at TD, and she was visiting me in Greenville, and we had dinner. I brought her to my home. We had a strategy session together, and it's just really helping her understand me and how my world evolves, and hopefully, and I think she did walk away with some gems that will help her as she looks to develop as a leader, as a stronger leader in the organization. So those are some things that I think is a difference. You need both, but it depends on certain timing when you need a coach, and then what type of mentor you're really looking for.
Kelley Cornish, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. This has been a pleasure, and I just look forward to possibly coming again. And so thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching. I'm Vanessa Tyler. Join us next time on Sarder TV, where thought leaders come to share their ideas.